I think about an elastic band sitting on my desk for 6 months. I went away and was living somewhere else and came back and went to stretch it out, and it literally crumbled in my hand. And I think if we're
Yes.
if we're too fixed to particular roles, to particular patterns and expectations and scripts and whatever it might be, that's not helpful either. We need that responsiveness and the adaptability.
Hi, and welcome to Beyond Empty Nest. I'm your host, Jody Silverman, speaker, mentor, and Chief Dare Officer at Moms Who Dare. Every Thursday, I'll share stories of midlife transformation, happiness tips, and dare you to see the opportunities waiting for you so that you can make this next chapter even better than the last. If you're ready to dare, I'm ready to dare with you. Let's get into today's episode. Welcome to Beyond Empty Nest. You know that in-between stage, the one where life feels like it's on pause and you're not sure what's next? Maybe your kids have left home and suddenly you're staring at a blank slate wondering, now what? Well, today's episode is all about turning that stuck feeling into your launching pad for something extraordinary. This week, today, we're diving into From Stuck to Soaring. Turn that in between into breakthrough. So if you're ready to stop feeling stuck, start building a future you're excited about, stick around because your breakthrough is waiting. Joining me is someone who has mastered the art of reinvention and is here to help you do the same. Dr. Rebecca Sutherns is an author and midlife transition coach, helping high achieving women navigate life's toughest transitions, whether due to career shifts, emptiness, or other personal challenges. She gives her clients clarity, energy, and confidence by aligning their values with their actions. Using the elastic method, she helps women stretch into the next phase of life without snapping or snapping back. Rebecca, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much for having me, Jody.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I am so excited for this topic because so many women, and like you said, whatever the transition is, whether it's empty nest, whether it's retirement, starting a whole new career, even if it's retirement and wanting to volunteer, kind of feel stuck and don't know really what the next step is or is this the right thing for me? So I'm really excited about this story. But like all my guests, we all have stories. So before we dive into all your tips on how to go from stuck to soaring, can you share a little bit of your background story, how you got to be doing this work that you're doing?
Sure. There's always different ways to tell a story, right? And
Oh
so I
yeah.
think for this one, I'll start with on the family side. So my husband Tim and I, we met when we were 11. We've been together a very long time, and we have four kids in their 20s, and our oldest has two kids of her own. And so that, from a family point of view, is where we are. And I think that the part of the transition that I have been kind of leaning into and experiencing is that empty nest transition. But for me, I guess I'm in year two or three of all of the kids being out of the house. But the emptying nest took about almost 10 years. And so it feels like it's been a long season. And I think for me, it was a surprising one. I think I had the impression that people who struggled with that phase didn't have enough other things going on in their life, right?
Yeah.
And I was a bit like, I had lots of other interesting things going on in my life, and yet still found it difficult and was surprised at how difficult and almost felt like a cliche. Like I didn't really want to talk about it with people. It felt kind of obvious. And I think I was embarking on a journey at that time of learning that even transitions that are wanted and positive and all good news are also difficult. And so in the midst of that, I'm an entrepreneur. I've been a strategy consultant for about 27 years. And gradually over that same period of time, people that I work with on boards or executive directors or CEOs of nonprofits I was working with on strategy started coming to me individually to look for coaching as they were kind of developing their own, what we've come to call their own personal strategic plan to navigate the next stage of their lives. And so my own life was mirroring what many of my clients were experiencing. And so my group facilitation practice evolved into also including one-on-one and group coaching experiences to help people navigate transitions. So I could tell you more about that, but I think that's probably a good place to start the conversation.
I love that. I love how you opened it with the misconception that women and moms who have a career, who didn't walk away from another interest, another career, don't are not affected by empty nest. And that is a misconception because I too always had one foot in the business world throughout my motherhood journey. And yet I felt the empty space. I felt the call to reinvent myself. Like what I was doing was not going to be fulfilling for me. It just feels different and everybody's challenges are there. So I really love that you called that out because it is a misconception. And I had it too. I didn't expect to be sad and figuring out like who I wanted to be. So thank you for sharing that. Appreciate it.
Mhm.
All right. All right, Dr. Rebecca, we're diving into this. So, you talk about the importance of mastering flexibility and structure in midlife. So, why does that seem to be like the a recipe for navigating and getting unstuck here?
Yeah. I think that's a really great place to start, Jody, because um, you mentioned that I work with the metaphor of an elastic. And if you think about an elastic band, a rubber band, it can only stretch when it's anchored in one spot, right? If every single part of that elastic is moving, then it's literally doing this, right? It's spinning in a circle. And so we need to anchor it to something in order for it to be able to stretch. And that's one of the metaphors that I find helpful is being able to say, where are those anchor points? Where are the fixed points of the things that aren't changing? Because when we're going through significant change, it can feel like we are literally untethered, that there's nothing solid. And that is a really uncomfortable space. Our brains do not love uncertainty. They crave familiar, they crave patterns, they crave, what we know.
Yeah.
And yet we also recognize that if we get too anchored, we can become brittle. I think about an elastic band sitting on my desk for 6 months. I went away and was living somewhere else and came back and went to stretch it out, and it literally crumbled in my hand. And I think if we're
Yes.
if we're too fixed to particular roles, to particular patterns and expectations and scripts and whatever it might be, that's not helpful either. We need that responsiveness and the adaptability. And so I do a lot of coaching in adaptability using a tool called the adaptability quotient. And it's a science-based behavioral science tool that really looks at how we can find our preferred ways to adapt. So it's not a question of, am I adaptable or not? Will I adapt or not? Of course you will. But it's whether you are equipped to do it in a way that feels easy for you and is aligned to how you're wired, what you prefer. So if we can find that pathway to adaptability, we can begin to actually look forward to something that we previously have been, if not dreading, then at least maybe not quite ready for. Because I think for many of us, sometimes our kids develop at different paces than we do, right?
Mhm.
And they move on to a new stage when we're not quite ready to move to that next new stage. Um, and that in between time where we can feel stuck, it's called being in that liminal space. And it really is kind of that messy middle where we just feel like we're in the muck of something. And so if we can have a few things to give some almost like scaffolding that feels steady, that allows us then to adapt and experiment and be flexible in some other ways that are going to let us get to a place where we can start to imagine what that next chapter might look like in ways that are fun. And right now, when you're in the middle of it, it doesn't seem fun at all because we're often still kind of clinging to that old pattern that requires some grieving, right? And some
Ah.
adjusting and some acceptance that maybe we have to work through first.
Oh, I love that. I never heard of the adaptability. What did you call it? The adaptability
Quotient.
quotient. I love that. I love it. And you know what? Because it goes with almost everything that I've learned in my personal growth journey. We all learn differently. We all adapt differently. We all bounce back. Our resilience is different. It's not good, it's not bad. It's personal to us because our brains are all wired differently, right? We're all unique. I love that. I love how I like the idea of structure and flexibility combined. I love that because there's so much letting go around midlife. There's so much where we have to let go. I usually don't use the word half, but you do have to let go of certain things if you're going to open space and allow in what you need. But I like the idea of having anchors for that. So I'm gonna deviate here for a minute. So if you have a woman who is feeling stuck in what is her next move for herself. Now, I don't know, maybe you have to look at this separately. Whether she has a career, she doesn't want that career like that's what happened to me. I thought, so my kids are leaving. I'm noticing the empty space as high school progresses. Is what I'm doing what I want to fill my space with? And it was, oh no, oh no. And then I didn't know what that meant. I didn't stress over it. I just was like, no. And I didn't know. And I believe that that's what allowed opportunity to show its way. But if you have somebody like what would be the anchor and what would be the flexibility part of that? If you can give us an example of that.
Of course. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like, just to riff off the example you were starting to describe there, I think some of us are involved in um, paid work, for example, that complemented our parenting roles really well. So when our kids are in high school, for example, and we're doing something else, and we've kind of figured out the balance and kind of the,
Yep.
the crazy ecosystem that we're in when we're busy with growing kids. And then, so, like, literally, you take the kids out of that picture, or at least their role changes in that picture. And it could very well be that not only is the paid job not really fulfilling enough by itself, because before it was often complementary to some other things, and some of those things are gone, right? So it's understandable to me that the work piece would need some redefinition. But not only that, there's an identity piece, right? That of, and the identity not just in the roles we play, but in our self-concept and in what we consider meaningful work. And so to pick up on that example of what's fixed and flexible, for me, it can be a values-based thing of saying one anchor is what's really important to me. And so just as in my parenting years, a really great relationship with my kids was really important to me, that continues to be important to me. How I live that out and how much access I get to them is different than it used to be. But having a really important, strong relationship with my adult kids is no less important to me than it was when they were younger. Similarly, it's important to me that my work is meaningful. And what meaningful work looks like might be different now because I have more time for it than I had before. I think for me, one of the challenges through that emptying nest phase was the transition period of, my kids they need me a lot sometimes and sometimes not at all. And I was kind of feeling like, hey, I'm available, but I don't want to be just like waiting around for you to need me
Yes.
now. And, it kind of felt, I remember doing like skipping like double dutch when you were a kid
Yeah,
on
oh,
the
I love
school,
double
doing,
dutch.
do I come in? Do I not? Do I like, what do I do? And so I think for me, it's actually been easier with them gone than it has been when they were kind of like coming and going. And that
Yes.
might be different for different people. But the flexibility I needed to have, say, with my schedule, um, when they were needing rides places, is
Yes.
different than the flexibility that I need now. And I think the other thing is that we can have some anchor points around not just our values, but we can also have anchor points around our relationships. So, for example, I mentioned my husband Tim. We plan our lives around each other. That's a fixed thing. And the decisions we make are made in light of the whole sort of family system. And
Yeah.
that continues to be true for us even as our kids are older.
Yeah.
But trying to figure out what that looks like, but also realizing that some of the things that we thought might be fixed, you may not even realize that you're holding those too tightly and you need to loosen your grip on them. So one example in my life was that we became grandparents about 5.5 years ago, a little bit unexpectedly. Circumstances were such and timing was such that that was not a chapter we thought we were entering right away. And so we were still parenting teenagers while others in our family were starting their own families. And I hadn't realized, for example, um, how much I didn't think that was going to happen that way, right?
Yeah.
And so when it presented itself, I mean, I can say now that it's been delightful, but at the time it really did take me a while to adjust to that new identity, that new role, that new story in our family. And so sometimes the things that we're holding tightly to are scripts that we didn't even know we had. And our family is working through some of that now. We've got two of our girls are getting married in the next 16 months. And, same idea. You have some ideas about what you think a wedding is going to be like. Or,
Mm,
they might have those, we might have those, the other side of the family might have those. And you don't always realize that you're holding them until somebody asks about them and then or they get breached in some way.
yeah.
And you go, oh yeah, that was important to me. So, or why is it? And that kind of thing. So I feel like there's some fluidity in what
Yeah.
might be really like there's the really deep foundational anchors, and then there's the ones that are kind of stuck, but they, if you give them a
Yeah.
good hug, they would give a little, and that would be okay too.
Oh, I love that. That helped. No, that was very clear. And by the way, I am also planning a wedding this year. My oldest, my daughter is getting married, and you know what? That resonated in a big way. I really, for me, my daughter's 30. She's a full-fledged adult. She hasn't lived at home in I don't even know how many years. I had to let go of what I thought a wedding would be. Well, it's going to be amazing and I'm thrilled, but I had to let go. Like my mother was an integral part in planning my wedding. I was 23 years old,
Yeah.
24 years old. I don't know. I think I was older than that. I was 26. I can't remember. But I had to let go and realize she knows exactly what she wants. So I get that whole part too. So I love the whole anchor and flexibility part. Love that. So let's talk about the how empty nest. And I think you just kind of you naturally went there with empty nest being a full life, that it can be if we learn, and I think it all flows together. If we learn the anchor and flexibility part of it, it can be and is the most exciting chapter after the kids leave home for so many of us. It's just figuring out, I guess, what the anchors are and then where to move from there. But I know that you say that this is the most exciting chapter. So, somebody's listening saying, I get all this, but yeah, I want to be a mom. It's all I know. It's all I know. It's all I know. Because I talk about that too. That empty nest is a loss and an opportunity.
Yeah. And
So
I feel
this,
like every season of our life has that, right?
yeah,
Every season has things about it that are hard and things about it that are great. And we always have a choice as to which part of that we focus on, right?
yes,
And
we
so
do
I
have
think
choices.
we do. And I think for me, um, the grief of most transitions, and they follow a similar pattern. It doesn't have to be empty nest, and they're not always linear at all, but there is usually a letting go piece
Yeah.
when we're resisting it. And we're saying, you know what? I loved that old role. I loved being a mom. I loved, that job. I loved my relationship I had with that partner, whatever it might be that we are needing to loosen our grip on. And I think people need an opportunity to notice and grieve and recognize and honor all the good things that happened in that phase before they're ready to move through that messy middle stage and into something that would be a new beginning. And so I'm somebody who finds new beginnings exciting. And I think
As you do.
what I needed in the midst of the muck of that was an ability to imagine a desired future that was going to be as meaningful and aligned with my values. And so one of the struggles I had during that season was I can't think of a job, paid or otherwise, that feels as meaningful as parenting in terms of not that I would love every minute of parenting, I didn't, but in terms of its meaning and the contribution and being sort of irreplaceable in that job, I felt very conscious of being utterly replaceable in every other role in my life. And that made it really hard to let go of that parenting piece. And I think I was being a bit dramatic. I think I was like, I am still very much in a parenting role, just in a very different one, and one
Yes.
that allows me actually to do a whole bunch of other things with a bunch of freedom and creativity that I didn't have a lot of mind space for or calendar space for when we had four busy kids at home. And so now that I'm kind of on the other side of it, I can really enjoy some things about it. Whereas, if somebody had pointed those fun parts out to me 5 years ago, I probably would have been like, I can sort of see that, but that doesn't sound that fun to me because the fun that I've been having was kind of rear view mirror looking. It was, I've enjoyed all of this stuff and there's a loss there. And there is, but I think there's a loss and a gain in everything we're facing. And I think if we can, I spent some time at a place called Modern Elder Academy. It's in Baja. It's something run by Chip Conley, who he calls it the world's first midlife wisdom school. And
Yeah.
I've been there twice. And one of the times I was there, I really sat with the idea of, do I believe, like at a belief level, do I fundamentally believe that the best is yet to come for me, or do I believe that the my best days are behind me? And that's just one example, but I think sometimes there are some core beliefs that we really need to interrogate a bit, to say, what do I think? Because if I think that my best days are behind me, the level of hope in my life is much reduced than if I believe or choose to believe that my best days are ahead of me. And hope is one of the elements of adaptability that is actually the most predictive of how energized we're going to be by the need to adapt. And so there's others. Grit is one, mental flexibility is one. There are 15 of them. But I had to make some decisions about what I was going to lean into and where my focus was going to be. And so I jokingly sort of said to my husband early days of that transition, I think I'll be okay when they're all gone. But this in between of having some of them
Yeah.
here and some of them gone, I don't like. I liked having, like, I like all my chicks in the nest, or they can go and fly their way that they
Yes.
go. I will do my thing. But I think also the mindset we bring to that, I read somewhere that someone said, I don't want to be called an empty nester. It's so sad. I'm going to be called a bird launcher. And
I
I think
know.
I get
I don't
that.
mind calling it an empty nest. I've
I don't
heard
care, but
free bird, bird launcher.
I do think there's something about the way we frame something, of whether we frame something as, my best days are behind me or ahead of me. And it's not in a sort of toxically positive kind of
Right.
everybody be cheery all the time kind of way, but it's in a way that says, what does the new version of me require and even want. And
Yeah.
so I think for me, part of the journey was figuring out the want piece, because I feel like what I wanted was lots of kids, and thankfully we had that, but I hadn't really asked what I wanted for a long time. And that felt
Yes.
like such, I mentioned a cliche earlier. That's what it felt like. It was like, oh, am I actually one of those people that has, like some sort of martyr, denied all of my wants and needs for the last 20 years? It wasn't like that. There's no sob story for me here at all. I was making lots of choices and was really privileged and really loving my life. But I realized that I had also, um, I don't want to say lost touch with what I wanted. I needed to reconnect with what the newest version of me wanted.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so
That.
I
I
got some stickers printed recently that says that version of me is no longer in print.
Oh,
And
I love that.
what is this next version of me, and what's she like, and what does she love, and what does she need? And so I'm really enjoying being able to lean into those questions now. And probably anywhere from 8 to 3 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to get much joy out of that, because I was still more in the grieving, adjusting, loss kind of phase
Yeah.
of it.
And I have to tell you, it came up twice during this conversation about that in between stage. I have found with the women that find me, that join the Facebook group, or the Moms Who Dare Facebook group, or the Double Dare membership, the resistance to register for that art class, commit to the walking club, whatever, because of the in between stage. What if my child, who's half in, half out, wants to be home and wants to have dinner with me, and now I'm committed on Tuesday nights? It's a thing where we want to just be available. And I share with them, I'm like, and what if you committed to a Wednesday night commitment? And what if your child said, hey, I'm home for dinner Wednesday night. Do you want to have dinner with me? What if you said, you know what? I have my art class, but we can get together afterwards. When I come home, we can have like ice cream, and or even, if they're adult, a cocktail, whatever you want to do with them. And I said that once to a friend, and they're like, oh, I'm like, you're, because I really believe, Rebecca, that we're always teaching our children. If we teach our children, if we're constantly saying, oh, I have my art class, but I'll cancel it for you, or I have this and I'm going to cancel it, we're really teaching them that our priority is not our priority, that we're not honoring our commitments too. And they're watching. But it is a difficult stage when they come and they go and they come and they go. And I do love what you said. That question is really a good question. I'm looking at it. Do I believe that the best is yet to come, or do I believe that my best days are behind me? If you can answer that honestly, you've just opened up the door to figure it out. Like you release something when we can say, well, everything I loved doing was around motherhood. And we are still moms, by the way. I'm still, they know what they know and they don't know what they don't know. And even as adults, they're navigating things for the first time, whether it's a job change, a health challenge, getting engaged, doing whatever they're doing. And you said that too, they need us. They will always need their mother. I have a t-shirt, a funny t-shirt that's my humor. It says motherhood, a life sentence with a big heart because they need us, but they just need us differently. And now you get to have the mindset shift. We get to have the best of both worlds. I get to be a mom in a different way, and I get to do something I want to do for me. And I just think that's a beautiful, I think that's what makes that's the core of what makes this the most exciting chapter yet is that you can have a little bit of both now.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and it has been an extremely exciting chapter. I know for me personally, yes, I have sadness, moments of sadness. Yes, I have those times where I haven't spoken to them. Why haven't they called me? I'm their mother. They haven't called me in 2 weeks. And then I take a deep breath. I'm like, what's really going on here? I'm like, well, I miss them. So just tell them you miss them, you know? Be
Yeah.
honest. So I love that.
Yeah.
And you kind of talked about, I mean, it's the structure, it's the anchor and the flexibility and, asking yourself those questions and, learning, you say learning to love a future that you think you're dreading,
Mhm. Yeah.
that you believe you're
And
dreading.
I think there's an imagination piece to this actually. And as adults, we our imagination muscles are a little weak, right? We think of that as the purview of
Yes.
kids. But actually adults, all of us, imagine based on our memories actually. Like what we know and what we experience is the launching pad for what we can create and imagine. And so as adults, we have a lot of memories on which to build new pictures of what the next chapter can look like. And so I think part of it for me is helping people tap into that idea of what could be amazing, what might you want, what lights you up, what's the sort of quirky things that you love. Because we each have really specific answers to those questions. And, if you get people talking about those kinds of things, they light up. And there is a reluctance to move into that. And there's all kinds of, stories we tell ourselves about what makes that hard. Um, Including that it feels, it can feel selfish, it can feel really self-centered when our whole existence has been sort of outward oriented. And yet the story doesn't have to be like that. I mean, you can still be very involved in sort of outward oriented, service oriented activities that are meaningful. And I think for me there was I mentioned a patch where I thought yes, I could list a whole bunch of things, but none of them seem to measure up
Yeah.
to that really meaningful parenting role. And so realizing there are some things that are continuing, like you said, lots of parenting roles are continuing, and I'm actually getting some time back. I thankfully have some discretionary income and time and resources. And, it's a really good time to reconnect with friends. And I'm doing a lot of traveling. And there's just, there are some really good things about it, but I don't want to minimize for people
No.
the journey to get there. And I think, when I go back to this elastic metaphor,
Yeah.
if you think about an elastic band that's been overstretched, sometimes elastic bands just snap, right? I mean, they just get too much stress all of a sudden and they snap.
Yep.
But more often it's like our bathing suits or our stretchy pants, right? Where the elastic just gives, right? They just like can't stretch anymore because they have been stretched for so long in one spot
Yes.
that they just have nothing left. And what makes something an elastic is that it can bounce back, right? And it loses its ability to do that. And I think that metaphor or that piece of the metaphor helps me to go, are there areas where I'm getting almost stubborn about wanting to stay in a particular shape that I'm so used to? Like I'm just really used to it. It's like those stretchy pants that have
Comfortable.
stretched, right? They're comfy,
Yeah.
you've worked them in, right?
Yeah.
And yet you go, like, do I really want to stay in this one stretched
Yeah.
shape forever? And so we have to kind of find again that actual elasticity that lets us assume different shapes, but also doesn't just like automatically snap back. And that's where the metaphor breaks down in kind of a helpful way because humans can learn to be more stretchy. That's the adaptability piece.
Yes.
But we also have choices about whether we snap back into old roles that don't suit us anymore. So if we have enrolled for that art class and we do say to our grown kids, I'll meet you afterwards, it's a bit of a jolt to the system, right? It's like, hang on, mom's always the one that is available.
Yep.
Nothing but available, right? It's like I'm often available, but I'm not always available. And we all have to kind of adjust to it. And that's me making a choice to say, I'm not going to just automatically snap back into old shapes that no longer serve any of us,
Mhm.
actually. And I'm going to be intentional about that. I'm going to communicate it, but I'm going to choose what pieces of maybe old me are continuing into new version of me and what old parts of me served me really well at the time but are not serving me anymore. And that's an element of unlearning where you don't, it's not that you were necessarily making a mistake or wrong or whatever previously. It's like those served us really well for a season. And sometimes we need to acknowledge that they have served their purpose. Those
Yep.
elements of our identity, those roles, those ways we spent our time. It's like, for us, the symbol of that in our family is that I don't drive a minivan anymore. I needed a minivan for a period of time. I never loved my
Loved my
minivan,
minivan.
right? I don't know. I
Loved
wasn't
it.
a
I
minivan
loved
fan.
it.
I could have
And
lived in that minivan. I practically did for,
yes.
we had two in a row and probably
Right.
20 years of minivan driving. And like, yeah, I could still drive a minivan right now, but why?
Right.
And is it better? Well, it was great for what I needed, but it no
Right.
longer, it wasn't a mistake at the time. It suited us well. It's kind of lovely not to be driving the minivan.
I know.
So, what's the minivan equivalent for any of us where we go, served us well. Thank you very much. Honor it for its service, bid it farewell, right? And we're sort of doing the Marie Kondo thing of our own
Yeah.
mindsets to say, where am I holding myself back in this? And I think I needed to and I see this in my clients, that we need to allow each other space to grieve and to sort of name like what is
Yeah.
going on, giving some language to it. But I think as people can gradually begin to imagine some possible futures that they wouldn't hate, then they can gradually try them out, and you learn that that new shore that you're swimming toward is not, I mean, it's less familiar, but you might like it more than you think.
I love that. I love that you brought imagination into it. It's all about daring to dream again, daring to, imagine what could be. All right. So, well, that's a good lead in into, my audience knows it's dare time. It's a really good lead in because you shared a lot of really good, thought-provoking strategies and tools. You gave a lot of tools. And in our show notes will be all your contact information, how people can reach out to you and work with you and, navigate this next chapter so they can go from stuck to soaring. So we will share all of that below in our show notes. But right now it's dare time, Dr. Rebecca. What is the dare that you have to stretch
Mm.
our audience today?
All right. Here's my dare.
Okay.
Uh, I would dare your listeners to experiment, to literally design an experiment. What is something they could try where it's a bit of a stretch, where it makes you feel like a little sick, like you kind of catch your breath a little, but it's not, the stakes are low enough that if it doesn't go well, it's not, no, it's not tragic. Nobody dies, right? It's just, I'll use your example, Jody, of the art class. You enroll for a 6-week art class. No one's making you become a professional artist.
Right.
And I think the reason I'm bringing this up as a dare is that experiments, as much as we can also hold them loosely, they require us to be beginners at something, to not be good at something. And that's what one of the things people find awkward about transitions is being a rookie at something is really hard. And I don't know when the last time was that your listeners would have tried something they really suck at, right? You're really bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's my dare, is to try an experiment that requires you to do something you're not very good at.
I love that. Oh, I love that dare. Requires you to do something you're not that good at. I love it. Done. Dare. Accept the dare, everybody. Accept the dare. You know what? So much was shared. So much greatness was shared during this episode. So share this, everybody. Listen, share this with another mom. Share this with a woman. And she doesn't have to be a mom, but share it with a woman who's going through some type of change or transition that's feeling stuck or struggling or fighting back against it. This is an amazing episode to share with at least one other woman in your life that you love and care for, and maybe embark on the dare together. If you don't want to do it alone, it's always good to grab another wing woman to join you in your journey. And Dr. Rebecca Sutherns, thank you so much for being a guest on Beyond Empty Nest. I'm really looking forward to hearing from our listeners what their biggest takeaway was. So share your biggest takeaway. Share it with me. Go right to Dr. Rebecca. I will make sure she hears all your comments if you send them to me. And don't forget that next week there'll be another brand new episode of Beyond Empty Nest. Thanks for being part of our community. And as I always say, dare on. Love this episode of Beyond Empty Nest? Head to jodiesilverman.com for full show notes and more fun resources. Hey, are you feeling stuck? Like every day is just Groundhog Day? It's time to shake things up with my 30 doable dares. These simple, fun challenges will get you moving, boost your mood, and spark that sense of accomplishment that you've been craving. Doing something new can transform your mindset and build your confidence. Are you ready to dare yourself? Click the link in the show notes and start today. Let me know which dares you took action on so I can celebrate with you. Dare on.